season of the year when I know moments are precious, to take this hour to be with us tonight to talk about Colab and your congregation possible and potential participation in the 2015 go-around. What I want to share as we begin is that what I'm going to be talking about this evening will be recorded so that you can revisit it at a time that is comfortable and convenient for you, and even use it, as some will be doing from the earlier this morning presentation, to their congregational leaders that couldn't be online, as they together discern and decide if being in the Colab would be something good for their church. So as we begin, I'm going to start with the screen that you see of one of the logos and symbols of our region and talk with you tonight about what Colab is. Colab is a partnership of the American Baptist Churches of Pennsylvania and Delaware and the Oxano organization, and the resources that primarily came out of the Church Unique book. Some of you will remember that 2 years ago we emphasized the Church Unique resource in our leadership learning communities in the 2 pastoral retreats that we held in the springtime of that year, East and West, and then we made that the focus of our biennial in the fall, even bringing in Will Mancini and members of his team, and spent those 3 days together in Altoona talking about Church Unique. And I said many times, if all you did was read the book and didn't make it to the biennial, you only got half the story and picture, because Will shared so much more from another perspective that really completed everything. But after that biennial was completed, the conversation began both among the regional pastors and leadership, as well as local church folk, maybe some like yourselves, that said, where do we go from here? So the region entered into a period of discernment and discussion with the Oxano organization and came to the decision that we would partner together to do a collab, bringing together on-site churches from all across the region, Pennsylvania and Delaware, and work together in a 6 months intentional and intensive process of vision formation and vision facilitation. You've heard this word collab thrown around a lot in writings and in speaking opportunities. So what really is it? Well, the word co means two. And so collab is a partnership of two. It's been local churches and the region. It's been the region and Oxano. It's been the region churches and Oxano. It's been the region churches and Oxano and the Lord. It has been a collaborative, cooperative experience last year and this year as well. The lab part of that phrase that we use to describe or to designate this time of intentionality together carries 2 meanings. One is labor. It's work. It's not going to come easy. You've got to commit yourself to the process, but the outcomes, as we've already seen in churches last year and this year, congregations and organizations, has been awesome. But by lab, we also mean that there's going to be learning taking place by a series of experiences, experiments, and even testing, thoughts and theories that we've held or had, and how those play out in our church or in our organization in relationship to what God would have us to do. So that's the basic meaning of collab. But what I'd like to walk you through is the actual experience of it from a local church perspective. Now remember, we've not only had local churches in the collab now, we've had organizations like the American Baptist Women that went through it this year, and next year we'll have different organizations involved on associational and regional levels. But there are actually, and follow me as I say this so I'm making myself clear, there are actually 6 sessions, but we compress the first 2 into the first session, and then each of the remaining sessions stand on their own, because we discovered that earlier on it is good stuff, but stuff that can be more easily assimilated than when you're later in the process and are working through some more difficult levels. So the first session, in 2013, we had actually 6 individual sessions exactly 1 month apart. This year, we decided to reduce it from 6 to 5 and to allow there to be 6 weeks between each of the sessions to provide more time for the on-site team to go back to their church or to meet with their organizational leaders and to work with the material that had been given when they came for those on-site sessions. By the way, as I said, there are 5 on-site sessions. They represent 6 sessions in total, first session containing 2. They are 6 hours on site, and then it is the expectation that that on-site team will go back to their church or organization and work for a day, setting a dedicated day aside, and work through the material with a larger team. Most of the teams that participate from congregations are made up of 3 members. Usually the pastor and 2 key core lay leaders. But there is the expectation that those 3 will go back to a larger group in the church of maybe 5, 7, 8 and work together during that day. And then bring what came out of that day session together back to the next collab and build on the work previous for the work that is ahead. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If it's a multi-staff church, we've had maybe 5 people come, 2 pastors and 3 lay leaders. If it's the organization like the American Baptist Women that represent the whole of our region, Pennsylvania and Delaware, there were 6 members of their on-site team that came to each of the 5 on-site sessions, 3 representatives from the western part of the region, 3 representatives from the eastern part of the region. There was also some teams that were larger because after the biennial in 2012, some churches took their own initiative and began to work the process, and so created teams even before we offered the opportunity to come into Colab. Actually, I can think of one church that specifically laid aside the work it had already been doing and started from scratch again, later on able to assimilate some of that earlier content, but nevertheless working right along with everybody else from the very beginning. But again, on-site team, usually about 3 members, and then the larger team at the church, 5 to 7. So session 1, what did we do there? Now, because some of you are on the telephone and not able to see the computer, you'll have to allow me, for those that are online, to belabor just a little to provide descriptions of what you're seeing and I'm talking about so that people on the phone, only on the phone, can visualize in their minds what we're saying. What's on the screen right now are 3 overlapping circles, and those 3 circles represent 3 key areas in the formation of vision. Local predicament, which is what are the unique needs, the real opportunities that God has in our context and community where our church is located. Aside to that, just as important, is the collective potential. What has God placed within our congregation or organization, association, that we can use to meet and minister to those realized needs? And then in conjunction with that, connected with that, is the apostolic esprit, which is the words Exano uses to talk about what is the passion that drives our clergy and lay leaders that they would like to see happen. I made this clear after the biennial 2 years ago that you have to have all 3 of these to realize real vision, because if all you have is local predicament or local reality and collective potential, you have social service. If all you have is collective potential and apostolic esprit, you have people doing a lot of stuff, both laity and leaders, but it's all self-serving. And if all you have is local reality or predicament and apostolic esprit, all you end up with is a few lone rangers doing their own thing, but excluding the greater body from participation in ministry, which is contrary to one of our very Baptist principles of the empowerment of the laity and the participation in priesthood of all believers. But what is important about this exercise, and then you spend time as a team on site and back at church or with your organization or association, fleshing all these three areas out, is where the three come together and form the shape of a shield. We call that the kingdom concept. That's what drives the local church. Now, on the next screen that you're seeing, I've taken that shield, if you will, because that's really what it looks like. Some call it a diamond, but I've taken this shield off of that previous screen and highlighted it and enlarged it. And this is one congregation's work that they put together in first creating a key verse or signature story. And for them, it was the story or the parable of the Good Samaritan, predicated on the question, who is my neighbor? So that neighbor in this first of 4 sections of the shield became a critical word that this church embraced and became the basis of other work that they would be doing. They ended up taking that parable of the Good Samaritan and kind of amplified it or summarized it into transforming lives by showing God's love to people and the forgotten neighbors. Now you see that word repeated a second time, of our community. Then we challenged them to take from that amplified or sentence or summary statement a short phrase, and it was serving neighbors with God's love. And the one word that they pulled out of that whole thing, which this church saw as driving their vision, was serving. Serving. So keep that in mind as we move forward, because that's the work of the first session, is looking at those three realities: local predicament, collective potential, apostolic esprit, and then honing it down to this one word that becomes the driving force for the rest of the vision. Also, then and all sessions are build upon the session before it. So the second session, building on that, creates what Exano calls a vision frame. And again, for those of you not on the telephone, those of you only on the telephone, not on the computer, what people are looking at now is literally a picture frame. And I want you to see that picture frame divvied up into the 4 sections we often think of that are joined together at the corner. And what we're going to talk about are each of those 4 sections, because each of those sections are the successive sessions of the Colab. So the first of the 4 elements that we're going to talk about is mission, and in Oxano, that is represented by a compass, talking about direction. What is the direction of our church? Why? What is it that we are to be doing? For this church, and the example we're using tonight, they played off the word neighbors that you saw there in that kingdom concept, that shield on that one screen. Their mission mandate is to be neighbors, make neighbors, and build God's neighborhood. Now you hear that word neighbor 3 times there. Be neighbors, make neighbors, and build God's neighborhood. But what I want you to see, as I worked with this church and we developed their material a little further, they saw those 3 phrases as representing 3 directions. Being a neighbor or a friend is saddling alongside God. Making neighbors is getting to know each other inside the church, and building God's neighborhood is creating community with others outside the church. And you're going to see this trinity of connections a little later in their vision. So I'm hoping that you realize even now how all these elements tie together. None stand individually or in isolation to anyone else. They're all linked as God gives each participating congregation, organization, and association in the Colab their own unique framework. Be neighbors, make neighbors, build God's neighborhood, becoming a friend of God, becoming a friend with each other, and becoming friends with people outside the walls of the church, creating community. But I want to say something, because we say this during session 2, and this is not about making a mission statement, but rather having a mission that makes the statement. It's not about just putting together a bunch of words that we hang on the wall of our building or share with the members of our organization or association. It's about creating a mandate that drives us and becomes, again, the framework, the picture framework of the vision that God has given to those who are seeking it. So that is session 2. But also in session 2, we look at values. So if mission is what we're supposed to be doing, like in the case of the church we're using the example of tonight, being a neighbor, making neighbors, and building God's neighborhood, then the values define those criteria by which our work will be done. These are the absolutes that we hold to, that we will not release or let go of, and judge all activities as having these elements and saying that if they do, then we work with them. If they don't, then we work with whatever activity we're doing to make sure it aligns with these values, and if we can't make that activity align, then we don't do it, because doing it is contrary to what we hold near and dear. In the case of the church, they came up with 4 values, saying that anything we do has to have an element of hospitality, has to have an element of the application, and the emphasis is on the Word. It has to have an element of Spirit-filled service, because that goes back to the kingdom concept, that shield, which was the convergent point of the 3 areas of local predicament, collective potential, apostolic esprit, Spirit-filled service to others, and then investing in the family. So the emphasis for this church was on hospitality, the Word, service, and family. Now, they were having a difficult time trying to remember those 4, even though they're just 4. So we worked together to create an acronym or acrostic that would allow for better retention. And what we did was we came up with the word FISH: family, inspiration of the Word, service, and hospitality. And then playing off of that, we came up with a visual of the fish. And if you think about it, that's one of the earliest, if not the earliest, symbol of Christianity. Because the visual that people on the computers are seeing, that you on the phones are going to need to visualize, is a fish where one has already drawn the top arc of the fish, and now there's a finger on the screen drawing the bottom part. And there are 4 sections to this fish: the top part of the fish's body, the belly of the fish, the top part of the tail, the bottom part of the tail. And you'll remember in the earliest days of the church, especially during times of persecution, if people met one another and wanted to know if each other were believers without speaking a word, one would draw the top part of the fish and the other would finish it off by drawing the bottom. And so without speaking, there would be a bearing of witness between them. And so you can place each of the 4 elements, their values, on the fish: family, inspiration, service, and hospitality. And then playing off of a verse, because I think I showed you here in the screen before that every value, as all the elements of the Colab, must have undergirding found in the Word of God. Since we Baptists are people of the book, what we're saying and what we're doing should have chapter and verse. So each of the hospitality, each of the elements of the values, whether that be hospitality, the Word, service, or family, have to have verses associated with it. Excuse me. And those seeing online see that in this church's case, they have not yet done that part of the work, but they've gone from that to the acrostic of fish and then to the visualization, settling on this verse in Acts 2:46. Every day, they, the earliest believers, devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple complex and broke bread from house to house, creating community with people inside the church and people outside the church. Now, hold that house to house in your mind, because we're going to come to that in a screen in just a few moments to see how those words take the form of pictures to show how we're going to accomplish this vision. Let me take a moment, since we finished up this. Oh, let me say this first. For those of you looking on the screen, I've gone back to those three overlapping, overlying circles, and what you uniquely see, which reinforced for this church their desire to use the fish, is that in that kingdom concept, where that merger occurs, you can actually see the fish drawn there. Actually, it's several different places, pointing up, pointing to the left, and pointing to the right. So you can see the fish embedded in that very image of the three circles coming together. But now that we've gotten to that point and we're going to move on to session 3, let me pause and ask. I don't see any questions there in the chat box, but maybe you have a question you'd like to ask. Just unmute yourself, ask the question, mute yourself again, and I'll do my best to answer it. Are there any? Wow, that means I've either done a really good job of sharing this material so far, you all left. But I'm hoping it's not that latter
no,
thing.
We're here.
You're here. I can still see. Thank you. I can still see people under the.
Well done.
Under the attendees list. Oh, by the way, I did skip over on the screen, and you saw me do that, didn't you? Galatians chapter 6, verse 10. Now, therefore, while we have the opportunity, let us do good to every person, especially to the members of the household of faith. So you see that word, you see neighbors, you see households, you see house, you see serving, all continuing a thread and theme in the vision work of this congregation. And being faithful, by the way, to going back in time, we actually extracted that verse, Galatians 6:10, from the Aramaic Bible. Of course, I'm not sure the translation is exact, but we know, of course, that was the language that Jesus would have spoken. So let's go back here now to the sessions. Pastor Dan, we see your question, and I'll be answering. I see that, and I'll be answering that. So thank you for posting that for me. Here we go to strategy, and strategy will be represented in the Oxana organization by the flashlight, and the flashlight is for the purpose of showing us the way. So for strategy, it is how do we know the way to accomplish the mission that God has given us. So if the mission is what's driving us and the values form the borders and boundaries of the road on which we will travel, what is it specifically that we're going to do to see the realization of the vision that God's giving us? Well, there are 3 different ways you can do strategy. There's a linear way, which is, and you probably know this best by the purpose-driven church. By the way, no one strategy has more value or validity than the other. It is simply a tool or means to facilitate what you want to get done. But in a linear fashion, it means, like with Rick Warren's work, if you're familiar with that at all, he uses the image of a baseball diamond, saying everybody begins here and then moves from base to base with the ultimate goal of getting them back home and having hit the proverbial spiritual home run. But everybody starts in the same place and moves from place 1 to place 2 to place 3 along a predetermined line. Now, in the cyclical strategy, you have people moving in a predetermined fashion, but they can enter anywhere into the strategy and then move from that place to the next one that has been predetermined to follow it. But in the mosaic that you're seeing there, for those of you that are able to view the screens, the mosaic, people can enter at any place within the strategy, and there's usually at least 3 components to the strategy, probably no more than 5, definitely no more than 6. Otherwise, it begins to get way too cumbersome and difficult to navigate. But in the mosaic, a person can enter anywhere into the strategy and move to any other element of the strategy without following a predetermined path or line. So linear, 1, 2, 3. Cyclical, you could come at any point, but then you follow a pattern of 1, 2, 3. And mosaic, you could enter at 3, move to 1, jump to 2, back to 1, up to 3, and so forth. Those are the three options that are given to Colab participating churches. And you make your own decision based on discernment as to the best that would work for you and your context. In this church example's case, playing off the households, right? Because what people are seeing now on the screen are graphics of little houses, is that they had three components. The way to facilitate their vision, to move people, and really all vision is about, though it's going to be done uniquely and differently by each church, all vision is about getting people to become fully committed followers of Jesus Christ. And for this church, they said there's three components in our church, in our strategy, to accomplish that: worship, small group, and service. And for those that can see the screens, you readily know that they decided to use a cyclical format to facilitate their strategy. A person can enter any of those three and move, though, from where they started to the next one that immediately follows it. Now, we took this a step further as we looked at these three components of worship, small group, and service, and realized that they were pointing in three different directions. Remember back when we talked about the mission mandate? Being a friend, that's directed towards God or neighbor. Making friends, neighbors, that's directed towards those that we know, getting to know them better. And then building God's neighborhood or creating community with people outside the church. What you see is three directions playing out here. One, upward towards God. That's what they saw the component of worship doing in their strategy. Inward towards one another in the small group experiences, and then outward to those beyond the church's walls through the means of service. So again, like in that, so I'm hoping that you can appreciate, and what's so exciting, and there's no way for me to really convey this to you over the computer or over the telephone, is to see these God sightings, these God moments, these epiphanies when a team comes to these and begins to see how what they worked on a couple months ago is playing out now, and that clearly, like with Scripture covering so many thousands of years, there's somebody that's working through all this, and that person is God, who just continues to bring it all together and bring it to light and life for us. That's what you see here. Now, the final element of the vision frame, the fourth and final side, if you will, of our box, are measures. And that means, what are we putting out there as accountable means to judge if our efforts are successful? What are we putting out there so as criteria to be that is accountable, achievable, clear, and concise, that we hope to be able to realize through our efforts and the expense of our energy? So we've done mission, created a mandate. We've created borders and boundaries defined the road on which we're going to travel. Strategy is how we're going to get from where we are to the realization of that vision. Remember, for this church, or that vision, that mission, for this church, it is being a neighbor, making neighbors, building God's neighborhood. But how do we know 6 months down the road, if we do a review, a year, no later than a year down the road, looking back on our work, how do we know if we've realized it, if it's come to pass? Well, we did some wordsmithing, and those who are looking at the computer screen immediately see what I'm speaking of, and we made now all three elements of their strategies words that begin with S. The first one is service, but you heard that before, but here it's taking on a different nature. That's worship service Sunday morning, in contrast to another use of the word service, which means what we do the rest of the week. So one is Sunday morning, and the other household represents what we do from 12:30 Sunday morning till the following 9:30 Sunday morning, and then in between that is the experience of small groups. For this church, they created a threefold measure. They said that anything that we do strategy-wise should accomplish three things. It should give people the opportunity to experience God. It should give people the opportunity to engage others, and it should give people the opportunity to expose God to the world. Experience God, engage others, and expose God to the world. The sharing of the gospel, if you will. So each one of their strategy components, service Sunday morning, service rest of the week, small group realities during the week, must have these three elements in them. But that's still not enough to judge objectively, because your experience of God and my experience of God can be really different. But there's no way to really find a median in that to know, is it really working? So you take a step further, and with each one of those measurement mandates, they create individual measures, like you're seeing here. And we just used for the example tonight the small group. Remember, small group, like the other two elements of worship service and service, have to give people the opportunity to experience God, engage others, and expose God to the world. What they said was this, that in order for a small group to realize those three things, people need to participate in weekly Bible study, because that's where we encounter the Lord in His Word. They need to participate in a monthly social. That's where we have the opportunity outside a classroom, whether that learning place is in the church or in somebody's home. We need to give people the opportunity just to get to know each other, because the Bible study helps them to get to know God, but the social helps them to get to know each other, to build a relationship. And really, isn't that what it's all about, relationship? To build a rapport with each other. And then lastly, participate in a quarterly servant missional ministry. And that's taking God to the world. That's going outside the walls and sharing your faith in deed and in word with those beyond ourselves. So you have experiencing God through weekly Bible study, getting to know others, engaging others through a monthly social activity. Just a fun time beyond the church house, beyond the small group house, and then participate in a weekly servant missional ministry. Now I know these three things can be realized in each one of those elements, but the reality is that these are specific things by which the leadership of the congregation, and that's really the leadership's role, not to administrate, but to facilitate. Not to just do the nuts and bolts of things, but really to see that people individually and collectively are reaching the potential that God has for them, settling for nothing less than that realization. So for this church, that's how they then look. Are people in the weekly studies? And if they're not, what do we have to do as leaders to get them in there? Are those groups that are formed participating in monthly socials? If not, what do we as leaders have to do to help them have that together time? And are people just studying the Bible and getting together, but not taking their faith to the streets? And if not, what does the church need to do, and what do we as leaders need to do to help them get beyond their walls, whether that's the church walls or the walls of that individual small group location, get beyond those walls and connect with their context and their community. Now, under the measures come gauges. And these gauges just help us look at individual ministries in the church and see where people are on the spectrum and help to move them forward. Because a gauge, like a speedometer on your car, is to show forward movement. And so we create gauges, and those looking at the screen can immediately see that there are two sizes. There are church-wide gauges, organizational-wide gauges, associational-wide gauges that involve the whole of everybody and everything. And then there are sub-gauges, ministry-specific gauges that target things like in the church, youth group, maybe senior saint ministry, maybe Christian education. The list can go on. In organizations like the American Baptist Women, this would have been White Cross, Love Gift, AB Girls, student loans. And then the bigger gauges, like for the American Baptist Women, were their conference, were their leadership development, were their educational opportunities. So large gauges and small. For those that are now looking at the screen, I'm showing you an example of one that we did with this church, and this one is for worship, since that's one of the three key core components of their strategy. Obviously, and picture in your mind, those of you listening only by telephone, picture in your mind a speedometer, like on the dashboard of your car. Now, I'm showing my age, I guess, because this is an analog, not a digital, with the little needle. But 0 means the person does not attend worship. There's no movement towards the church. At the first slash, the first marker, if you will, it's 10, and that indicates a person that attends, and this is very timely, isn't it, once or twice a year, Christmas and Easter. But I want to pause here and say something to you. At least they're attending Christmas and Easter. Think how many people this season won't show up at church at all. So the people that make, for whatever reason, the conscious decision to come, wow. So whatever we put on for them ought to be the very best, because if all they come is Christmas in the end of the year and Easter in the springtime of the year, that's the only exposure we're going to have to them. So we got to give them our very, very best, hoping that the Spirit of God will say, hey, it's like this all the time. You need to keep coming back, because number 20's mark, slash, if you will, is that they attend Christmas and Easter, but then maybe a half dozen times of the year. Listen, it's minimal, I know, 8 times in a year of 52 weeks at best, but at least they're coming. Obviously, something has informed them, and they come to find out what it is. So whatever we're putting on Christmas and Easter got to be really good, and got to be representative of what we're putting on at other times of the year that will keep them coming back. But notice it goes from 20 to 30, where now they're attending every month. Actually, a church I just worked with last night in this very area broke it down to say not just every month, but they broke it down to say that one slash mark was they're coming once a month, 25% of the month, and that's regular attendance. But then they move to what you don't see on your screen or aren't visualizing in your mind, faithful attendance, which is 3 out of 4 Sundays. So regular attendance is 1 out of 4. Faithful attendance is 3 out of 4. And what you do there is realize that people have gone from being informed to being interested. Meaning what they're saying is there's something good here, and I keep coming back to get that good stuff. But then something happens. Because on the left side of the gauge, it's primarily about me, myself, and I, and what I'm getting out of the experience. But something happens, and in this particular case at 40, now this could happen earlier, but for sure, 40 should be happening when a person is coming 3 out of 4 Sundays a month. They bring somebody with them. And even though that person would not see themselves as a leader, they really are, because someone's following them to church. So they have gone from being interested to being involved, because they're bringing someone to that church service, to that organization's meeting, to that association meeting, because they're getting something out of it and find that there's something still there for somebody else as well. So they bring someone else with them. But then they take that to the next level, and they have a minor role in worship, where they're now behind the scenes, maybe as a greeter, as an usher, maybe folding bulletins during the week. It could be all kind of stuff, but they then go from the pew to standing and serving, even if it's in a small kind of way. Again, demonstration of leadership. And then 60 on the gauge we're looking at in this example is they have a major role in worship, which could be up front, reading scripture, leading songs, sharing the announcements, even maybe speaking once in a while. They've gone from behind the camera to in front of it, from a face in the congregation to a face to the congregation. And then lastly, and probably the height of movement on the spectrum, is that they have a critical role in planning the worship experience. Now let me say something. Not everybody is going to move to every place along here, and that's not the purpose of the gauge or the speedometer. It is not to try to get everybody to 70, because not everybody's going to get there. Actually, as you move around the speedometer, the gauge, you're going to find you're working with less and less people, but the depth of what they're doing is going to be deeper and deeper and deeper. But the job of the leadership of the church is to make sure that we're doing what we can to facilitate a vision that helps everybody realize their individual potential. And by having everybody realize their individual potential through the facilitation of the vision, we realize the collective potential. There, you remember that word from very early on? Because this is on the tail end of the Colab. Now we're going clear back to revisit what we learned in session 1. The very first minutes we are together, literally, and what we end up having is this collective potential at its potential and settling for nothing less than that. But everybody in our organization, in our congregation, in our association should find some placement on the gauge. If they don't, then our gauge is not inclusive enough or definitive enough. Now, trying to be faithful to our time, though we did have to start a few minutes after the hour, I'm going to move along. Session 5, which would be the last of the sessions that we have, is the alignment stage, which means we look at some new things that have come out of the Colab experience, and we look at what we're presently working with in our congregation, organization, or association, and we see how the two come together. And Oxano provides 5 options concerning each ministry of the church. Because what we literally do, one of the homework assignments of many, I want you to understand, this is good work, but it's hard work. We list every existing ministry of the church, and we look at its value in relationship to the criteria that we have set with our values. And we see if it is meeting all, as in the case of this church, all 4 of our values, then we billboard it. We put it up there, we put it out there, and we tell everybody, you ought to be in this because this will help you realize our vision individually and collectively. We look and say, well, some elements are there, but not all, so we do a little tweaking so that it's aligned, so that it's really working at its best. We contribute, meaning we add some to it that may be lacking. We might cage it, saying that, you know, it's just not going to work no matter how much effort, no matter how many resources of time and money and people we put into that, it's just not going to get better. But we're not ready to end it yet because we still see it serving a purpose, but not in the long haul of the realization of our vision. So we cage it, which means we don't give it a lot more than what it's already getting because we're investing those things in other ways. Or there are a few times, and they be few, but still important, that we shut them down. We close them up, and we say that they have served their purpose. It's time to set the sun on those ministries and to move on, because some of the saddest moments I've had working with churches is when they hang on to things they should have long ago let go of. They serve the purpose of that, there is no doubt, because those very people holding on to those things are the results of those ministries, but they're not creating those same type of people today. So we need to look at other things in the strategy area in alignment with the values that will help us to do that. Now, I'm going to park for a moment on the graphic you're seeing on the screen, and I'm going to verbalize it for those listening by telephone. What you're looking at is a clock, and the clock's time is reading 8:15. We're not there yet, but we're getting close to that, friends, actually. But 8:15, in the case of this church, is the time they prayed, because in each of the sessions, the on-site people are taught spiritual practices and disciplines that they then do themselves, but take back to the larger team and the whole of the church and ask them to participate in as well. These spiritual disciplines will involve prayer, and one of the first things we ask every team to do is to determine a daily time of prayer. And maybe 8:15 would be your time, because that in military time, 2015, would be when you're participating in the Colab. So every 8:15 in the morning, every 8:15 at night, we ask everybody on the on-site vision team, on the at-home vision team, in the whole of the congregation. You put this in the bulletin, you make mention of it in the newsletter, you remind people to do this wherever they're, I mean, I've been working with the American Baptist women who have used 8:14 because that was the year they were in their Colab, and literally during our online sessions, we've literally stopped right in the middle of a sentence. Someone is the watchkeeper, and you know the importance of the watchman or watchwoman on the wall, as the prophet talks about. They interrupt and say, it's time to pray. and we go to prayer to tell God, we know this is really your work, and we want to make sure you're a part of what we are doing. So there are a bunch of collective and individual prayer practices that we lift up for the participants, on-site team, at-home team, whole the congregation, every single time we are together. There's also the infusion of the Word. The American Baptist women, for example, were the one among all others that literally read through the Scriptures, Old Testament and New, 100 poignant passages from Genesis to Revelation to get their minds to be the minds of Christ. And Jesus being the Word, there's no greater way to have the mind of Christ than to get into the Word. And then at the end of the collab session, there is one other practice that we encourage people to do, and that is fasting. Because when you have to start making decisions about existing ministries in the church, if you're going to wrestle with those demons in your organization or association, as Jesus said, you better do that only after prayer and fasting. By the way, one church that participated in the collab, their pastoral leader, in the process of this experience realized that they had not been the church that they should have been for a very long time. And they actually, and we teach this during the collab, they had a solemn assembly or a sacred gathering. And they came together and even, and I have copies of this to show it's unbelievable, even wrote to former members asking them to return to the church, not asking them to come back to stay if they had found another place, but just to come back to let them say they're sorry for not being the church they should have been, to allow them to develop into fully committed followers of Jesus Christ. And all of that, the American Baptist women would tell you, their president, April, that it was the spiritual disciplines that brought life to all these other activities. And that's what I struggle with tonight, because here I am doing this dump truck load of information just on top of you without you having this 6-month togetherness experience. As month to month we're praying together and working together and walking together, and so all this seems so flat, whether it be flat on the screen or flat in my words, but what dimensions of life it takes on, personally, socially, spiritually, when we have these times of opportunities together. Now, let me pause there and remind you who's in the collab. Large churches and small. Churches with solo pastors and churches with senior pastors. Rural churches and city churches. Churches in the suburbs and churches in small towns. Churches led by seminary-trained clergy. Churches led by clergy educated in our regional school of ministry, or clergy that have no formal education at all. Churches that are thriving and just want to go to the next level. Churches that are just surviving and want to get out of that maintenance mentality and really thrive in the Lord. Churches that are pastored by females, churches that are pastored by males, churches that are pastored by interims, churches that are pastored by permanent pastors, churches that are pastored by full-time individuals, part-time bivocational. I mean, there's no one type. It is whoever God calls to be a participant in this experience. That is who plays a part. Now, with that said, let me take a few minutes now and field some questions and ask you what you might like to ask me. Are there any out there? As you're thinking of that and unmuting yourself, there is one question I got. Where are these sessions held? We don't know yet. And I say that because we don't yet know who will be in the collab. What we do is, in 2012, we held one site, and everybody came together in that location. Because it was 6 months long, we alternated east and west every month, because back then it was every month, not every 6 weeks. We went back and forth between the sites, and those in the east traveled to the west, coming the night in before. Those in the west the following month traveled to the east, coming in the night before, so we could start bright and early, 9 a.m., to finish up by 3 o'clock. For some churches, it was a 5-hour drive, but they committed to it. This year, we held it in 2 locations, and it was the staff that did all the running back and forth. So we'd go to the Pittsburgh area, for example, and we'd get there the night before, start early the next morning, do a whole day of collab, 6 hours, wrap things up by 4 o'clock, get in the car, drive 5 hours to Philadelphia, and hold our sessions in the American Baptist Mission Center there in Valley Forge. So that is what we did last year. We have not decided yet, but we did find that that worked well. It cut way down on cost. There was a lot of wear and tear on the staff, but that was negligible in comparison to all the other that. But I will tell you this: those that came to the alternating sites were kind of saddened when they heard that we were going to do it this east-west way, because they liked coming in. Maybe not the first time, I confess that, but by the end of the collab, they were actually bringing refreshments with them, home-baked pies and goodies, and they were visiting all that evening before, and were intentional about even coming early enough to have dinner with each other. So it was creating. So we haven't yet decided in response to that question, but that is we'll just have to wait and see what churches get on board, where those churches are at when we map them. Well, one of the exciting things about churches, I have to say this, when I'm talking about the different participants that are in them, oh my, we had a church as young as 6 months. Well, it's even less than that, but we had a church in there 6 months, which it is now, our new church plant in Harrisburg, and we had a church over 200 years old. So the spectrum is wide. It's just wonderful. Is there any
And
other questions?
Jeff, Bruce asked a question. He says, what type of feedback have you received from churches that have participated in Collab already?
Oh my, these are many. I mean, I want to be careful about what I say, because as they often put there on the on a television commercial, results vary. And so this may not be what your outcome is, but we have one church that participated in the collab that directly attributes the attrition of 75 new people into their church. 37 of those 75 were first-time commitments to Christ, and half of that 37 were baptized, and they attribute those outcomes to redefining their vision and being faithful to it.
Jeff?
That's just one. There's so many others, especially when you hear the individuals talk of what their outcomes were. Just those, like even in the example of that church that I gave that held the solemn assembly, just experiencing those type of spiritual experiences would not have been realized without participation in the collab. They wouldn't have come up with that on their own, but it was the process that led them to that, saying that these are the things, as we've really gotten in touch with God, been intentional about discernment and discovery, that we need to do, because clearly that's where God is leading us. Now, there was someone speaking up. I think I spoke over. I'm sorry about that.
Kathy, was that you going to share a moment what the experience has been for you and AB Women?
Oh, good. Kathy's on the line. Yes.
Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Stye, and I was on the on-site team, or I guess, was anyway. We American Baptist Women participated in Collab. We were blessed. We are blessed every day by the opportunity. We're blessed as an organization. We're blessed with the leadership from region, as well as just the time and energy. Jeff was very, very nice about the things that he said about American Baptist Women, but everything he said was true. And when we started, we didn't know what to expect, and we really had no idea it would be so amazing. I personally, the the big change for me, I read my Bible before, I prayed daily, but I didn't have the commitment and the connection before Colab that I have now. And now I find myself spending time in the Word that, like, I look forward to it. One of the commitments that I've made personally is I spend about an hour every day doing praise and worship while I'm getting ready for work, and it's amazing how that changes your day. I also want to say to everyone that Jeff did an extraordinary job of explaining the process and exactly what happened in those 5 sessions in terms of the work. The other thing that I want to say to everyone, and no, I'm not getting paid for this testimony, I swear. The other thing that I want to say is that it really, the opportunity and the journey is kind of like Moses, God and Moses coming out of the promised land. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that, because you have no idea where you'll end up or what God will reveal to you, but you're so supported and so loved in the process that it's like so awesome that it really, well, we're not done yet. We are still in the process. And one example, Jeff talked about sunsetting programs, and we have student loans. I also heard him mention that, and we thought that maybe that was a sundown program because we have all this money and we can't give this money away. And what we're learning is just to reframe it, and that it's an God hasn't revealed to us what we're going to use that money for yet. So it just really, it's awesome. If anybody wants more details, feel free to contact me or another person that would be amazing for anyone to connect with is our president, April Crownover Blunt, who is much more effusive about how amazing Colab is and has done an extraordinary job leading American Baptist women through the process. And I'll stop talking. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, Sister Kathy. Let me just, I do really appreciate that, because there's no better testimony than that of someone who's been there, done that, and I think I'm safe in saying, for Sister Kathy's sake, has in some ways changed her life, and that's what we're hearing.
Absolutely.
Let me just address a couple other things I saw on the board. Pastor Steve, thank you for making it clear that the new name of the Regional School of Ministry is ACTS, the Academy for Christian Training and Service, but we actually have not had an ACTS graduate yet participate in the Colab, and that's why we do have CLI grads, which was the former name, of course, the Church Leadership Institute, but I did put it in there so that I could specifically lift up the fact that I have every expectation that in the future, just as we've had past grads of our previously named school, we will have present and future grads of our ACTS also leading churches through Colab. Pastor Jim, you asked a question regarding balance, and it goes back to the 3 concentric overlying circles, and absolutely, you must have balance. If you don't, you have what I said when we began tonight, and that is if you overemphasize the collective potential and the local predicament or reality without the leadership's involvement, you have social service. If all you have is collective potential, utilizing what's inside the church, but you aren't building on that with the reality, so all you have is the collective potential of laity, the passion of leadership, you got a self-serving congregation, and if all you have is leadership and the local predicament and reality, and you don't keep it in balance, and those take a disproportionate amount, you have lone rangers doing ministry in exclusion to the body. And so you must keep those 3 in balance, and the spiritual disciplines help to frame those as the vision work unfolds. Let me also say, just nuts and bolts, that what as Mark said, for the sake of everyone on the screen, will be that this session has been recorded. We will give you that information for you to access it just for review, but also to use in presenting to your congregation the possibility of being in the 2015 Colab. What we can also provide you is a letter of invitation, which really lays out line by line what is the expectations and responsibilities of the congregation. We do ask for a $300 buy-in from every congregation, every organization, every association, but that nowhere near covers the cost. The region picks that up as a commitment to our partnership. To be honest with you, since I facilitate the collabs and the coaching and consulting between sessions before and afterwards, the reality is that the $300 buys lunch for everybody, to tell you the truth. And so what we end up doing is turning your buy-in right around and buy lunch for everybody when we're on the on-site session together. And I can only say for those that went to the West, wow, we had a chef cooking for us. It was awesome. But anyways, I digress. But the reality is that that's the financial buy-in. But this letter of invitation lays out specifically what the church is expected to do and the responsibilities of participation, what the region is expected to do and the responsibilities of their involvement, and what the Auxano organization will do and the responsibilities of their participation. And someone asked, what does the word Auxano mean for us? That is the name of the organization that Will Mancini, the author of the book Church Unique, decided to use to indicate synergy and connection and working together in a way to create something that didn't previously exist. But it's their organization's language. We emphasize probably the book more than the organization's name because everybody is asked to read Church Unique. There's reading assignments. There's work that we do on-site together. There are assignments given that you take home to work with on that dedicated day with the larger team. And so you'll probably hear Church Unique more than you probably will hear Auxano, but Auxano is the name of the organization through which we facilitate the on-site collab sessions. Are there other questions you'd like to lift up verbally or write if they haven't already been posted there on the screen? Well, yes, it's been asked, and you are right. This is provided for. Mark could probably speak better to this. This is provided for by Partners in Ministries offering. Absolutely. We facilitate the securement of the resources. There's two things you bring to every collab. You bring your copy of the Church Unique book, and you bring your copy of the notebook. And we'll give you a notebook and give you pages to put in that 3-ring binder every time we are together. I am noticing that we are at the 1-hour mark of when we were able to actually begin having to make sure everybody was on board online. So let me not delay or slow things up. If there are any final questions, let's put them up there now, answer them, and close it out. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. Any final ones? Yes, you can order copies through us. That's where they'll come. Yep, copies of Church Unique will come through the read. We provide you. We walk right with you, side by side, everything. But what we can do is, if you're interested in knowing more about Colab, you can write back to Denise and I at the email address you were provided for the link to be online. We'll provide you the link to the video that Mark will be posting and a copy, a generic copy, though we can personalize if you'd like, for your church, having all those 2-page information that you would need, and making ourselves available in the new year to talk with you folks if you need to. Personally, by even coming and making, as time permits, presentations at your church. The Colab will begin in May, wrap up in October, be every 6 weeks. The deadline for participation or decision we have made in the last 2 years, like the end of February, very 1st of March, so that we can get everybody together on the same proverbial page with the resources they'll need ahead of time, giving them even practices, spiritual practices to prep them for when we launch the Colab around that first week of May. Anything else? Yes. Oh, should each member of the team have a copy of the book? Definitely a copy if they're on the on-site team. We recommend it, encourage. It's a requirement for the on-site team. It's a recommendation for the congregation at large. It's a real encouragement for the larger team that meets that one day of dedication. So absolutely. Oh, excellent question. You're thinking, you're moving in that direction. It's wonderful. But I think I've covered everything else. Again, I don't want to delay your time. I want to thank you so much. Available to answer any and all questions you might have. When we go offline, just feel free to write me at your convenience. You have my email address. If not, I'll provide it to you. But why don't we wrap this up by, Frank, if you would you close us out in prayer, please?
Sure, be happy to. Let's pray together. Gracious God, give you thanks this night for your presence in our midst. Lord, for the potential that we've heard tonight about being able to discern your vision for the life of our church families. God, your word is clear to us that without vision, the people perish. And God, the thing that we long for most is to be able to be light and salt to a world that is lost. And so, God, tonight, do pray that you would take these learnings, these conversations that we've had even across the miles, yes, and implant them into the hearts and lives of the leaders that are with us, and help them to discern and hear your voice with clarity, God, saying, this is my way, walk in it, and give them the courage, Lord, to step out in faith. Lord, for the wonder of this season, we give you thanks. For the wonder of Jesus and his love, we give you thanks. Go with us now, O Lord, for we ask it in his precious name. Amen.
Thank you, Frank. And there's my email address up there on the screen. Thank you all for participating tonight. May, on behalf of our regional family, you have a very Merry Christmas and a blessed, blessed start to the new year. We'll be talking to you. God bless everybody.
God bless.
God bless.
Thank you.